Hi, I'm Joe from Miniature Landscape Hobbies, and in this episode, I'm going to demonstrate my method for painting tanks. This is a tried and true system that produces tanks to a pretty good standard that's fit for both the tabletop and display. And best of all, it's pretty easy to do and pretty fast. In this case, we're also going to demonstrate on the cool new Swedish tanks by Battlefront Miniatures. Let's get to it. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is proudly supported by these sponsors. I think it's safe to assume that if you're watching this video, you're probably into strategy games or military history in some way. And that's good, because this video is not just about miniature painting, it's also about the strategy behind miniature painting. I'm often quite surprised by the number of people that don't approach the artistic side of our hobby with a method or overall strategy behind their work. Now, I'm an obsessive planner, so to me, doing the preliminary work and crafting an overarching strategy behind painting my miniatures is second nature. But this might not be the case for everyone. After 30 years of working both professionally and for fun in the realm of miniature painting and building, I've come to the realization that a defined process for each army I build is not only helpful, but it also produces a real edge in maximizing the quality of my work. Therefore, I feel that building a process or strategy into any miniature project, be it just a couple of models, terrain pieces, or a whole army, is just good practice. As I see it, the individual benefits of a well-planned painting process can be summed up as follows. It increases speed, allowing you to get your models on the table faster. It also promotes quality in your work and provides a framework to improve. Having a strategy also helps make sure that your models retain a consistent look, and this ensures your work looks cohesive when deployed as a group. It also helps wastage of your supplies by working in batches. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, a process helps keep you on track to mitigate the infamous tendency of miniature gamers to get distracted during a job, resulting in lots of partly finished models or armies. In this video, I'm going to take you through my current project, which is a Team Yankee Swedish army, and I'm going to try to touch on the process elements, although I hope that this will be comprehensive enough to also help you as a guide to painting a similar army, if you wish. I'll of course be using airbrushes and tools that you may not have, so if this method interests you, then you might need to substitute steps. And that's of course just fine. What's important here though is that you develop a grasp of the structure I use, so you can hopefully learn a few tricks to maximize your hobby time and results. Lastly, though this should go without saying, the process I have here is my own, and though I want to share it, there are, of course, many other different options out there. So be sure to explore your own hobby products and methodologies. It'll help you immeasurably if you're not already doing something similar. Now, let's get down to business. What would be your ultimate bucket list item as a miniature builder or model painter? How about traveling to the miniature gaming capital of the world? For exclusive tours, discussions, and events with some of the top miniature companies in the world, including tours of Warhammer World and the Warlord Games HQ. While we're at it, it would be great to throw in some stops to the UK branch of the Battlefront Miniatures store and visits to other wargaming companies. On top of this, we'll see all the major military and historical sites in the UK, including a visit to the incomparable Bovington Tank Museum. Such a once-in-a-lifetime travel event is no longer just a dream, because from March 7th to March 16th, 2025, I'm inviting you to accompany me on this incredible trip. This one-of-a-kind travel experience designed for the dedicated miniature hobbyist and their spouses or guests is now available for my viewers. Please check the link in the video description. I hope to see you on the trip. Research for the painting process is vitally important. Fortunately, it's also easy to do. First, I decide on a paint scheme. This usually involves a quick Google search of my subject. As an example, I spent a little time looking at images of PBV 302 troop carriers before I committed to working on my models of them. Google is obviously your friend here, and of course any source material you can find. I also spent some time flipping through the Team Yankee Nordic Forces books to help decide on a scheme. Please realize that just because this is a historical topic, the paint scheme does not have to duplicate reality. The research only informs your basic colors to inspire and perhaps keep some grounding in your work. In the end, you should choose the colors that you want. In my case, I decided to keep a fairly similar scheme to the actual Swedish army of the time, though I subbed a gray-green in for the usual dark green. Why? Well, I liked the color and thought it suited the palette, so I just went for it. With the colors worked out, I went and got them out from my shelf. This included not only the majority colors, but also the small detail ones as well. I tend to pick out crew and stowage with dry brush whites and grays so that I can do a single coat of speed paints to let the nature of the speed paints do the shading and highlights all at once. I do this, of course, because it's fast, and the small, highly textured nature of 1/100 scale models lends itself really well to zenithal paints. At this point, if I'm missing a color or a product, I can go grab it from the local game store. And don't forget the primer while you're at it. If you're a Patreon supporter of my channel, you can also cash in on the sweet discount you get through Torchlight Games to get a deal on supplies to save money for buying more models. I can't stress enough that you need to get your paints in order before you start, so your workflow is not disrupted for want of a product. It's when you halt your work on a project partway through with the intention of coming back that people often get derailed. You want to avoid moving on to other projects, as this often results in lots of unfinished minis laying around. One thing I do at this point is consider the alternate paint schemes based on my chosen palette that I can use. This allows you to add some variety to your work, but at the same time have common colors that promote visual unity within an army or unit. In this case, I decided that the tanks, as the centerpiece vehicles for the army, would get full 4-tone camo schemes, while support vehicles and troop carriers would be left with the basic colors, so they were quicker to produce. Now I build the models according to instructions. There's not much to say about this, as it'll vary by subject. What I do here, though, is batch my models into a manageable group, usually 6 to 8 vehicles at a time. This is also when I mount the models so they're easier to hold while painting. There are a ton of products to do this, but I tend to glue resin and metal models to the top of a nail for this purpose, or I'll drill a hole in a plastic model and insert a spare piece of sprue into the bottom and glue it in place to make a convenient handle. The last step for preparation is priming. I poke the nails or sprues into the bottom of a box to hold them upright, and then I take the models outside to spray them with a primer from a rattle can. Or, if it's a smaller batch, I'll just airbrush it with a matte black. After years of trying different methods, I've concluded that the neatest and fastest way to lay down your layers is with an airbrush. Of course, you can brush paint on, but airbrushes use less paint overall, are faster, and you can create less opacity in the shadowy areas of each model, which allows for increased contrast. If you're unfamiliar with this, please find or borrow an airbrush to see what I mean. The savings in time and supply costs are immense, and it makes the initial investment in a compressor and spray gun worth it. After putting the basic color down, in this case US light green, I add a few drops of a lighter color, such as an off-white, and spray this top down where the light would hit the model directly. I also concentrate it towards the hard edges and the key details, like hatches. This creates a mid-tone to simulate how the real-world equivalent to my model collects light. As I planned for earlier, on the tanks I go ahead and block in NATO black, NATO brown, and green gray. I do this straight over the previous colors. Now comes the main highlight. After some experiments, I've concluded that at 1/100 scale, a common highlight can be made to deal with all the major colors at once. In this case, I use German yellow. This is applied as a quick dry brush to the whole model. Do yourself a favor here and set yourself up for success by dry brushing using a proper texture palette and a brush made for, well, dry brushing. After the dry brushing and applying so many colors, the model will look pretty wild, with too many different shades going on and a chalky finish. So we obviously need to do something to unify this. This is done with a layer of military green ammo of MIG shader, though a wash of an acrylic or other shading or unifying product will also be an option. When all this is dry, the effects are great, adding a common tint to all colors, tying the colors together visually, and downplaying the chalkiness. Before we depart from basic painting, I now do the cleanup. I take a black paint and block in the tracks, vision blocks, and any small details to prepare for the next steps. Once the black paint from the cleanup is done drying, I go after small details, picking them out with white. Which details you choose is up to you. I usually put a little white into the middle of each vision block and light, if they're large enough. And I go after any obvious tools. However, this depends on a model-by-model basis, and if it's just a gaming piece and not being used for photography, I often just leave this step out. After all this, any crew gets dry brushed gray and then white. All of this work prepares the zenithal aspect of these details, after which I go ahead and block it all in with speed paints. The colors, of course, will vary depending on the subject, but the results are really essential for adding visual variety and interest to what otherwise might appear as just a green blob. This step is also an opportunity to introduce a complementary color. Since most military vehicles are green, the odd red detail on a sensor or light will really pop and balance the appearance of the composition. Now the details are done, but we have yet to weather the vehicle or work on the tracks. After years of trying different methods, I've decided that most of the time a quick dry brush of dark brown on the tracks and lower areas of the vehicle, followed by stippling Iraqi or dark sand over this, does just fine. These simple additions help the appearance of the vehicle, indicating that it belongs in the natural environment. Now all the paint layers will look good, but the models will likely look a little flat. This is because we need to establish definition on key elements by lining in. Lining in can be done by painting black into panel lines or around stowage, etc. But this is slow, too slow, and it's hard, requiring hopelessly fine brushwork. Through research, however, I've found a solution: enamel panel liner. Before enamels can touch your acrylics, though, I suggest you protect your work with a couple coats of gloss or satin varnish. This will reduce surface tension to help with the upcoming steps, and it guards against damage to your hard work. When the varnish is good and dry, pour out some enamel thinner, like mineral spirits, and gently brush a thin layer of this on with a broad brush. While it's still moist, grab to me a black panel liner and use the applicator to deposit the enamel into the cracks, crevices, and shadowy areas. If the model is large, or you find the thinner is evaporating too fast, you may need to work on sections of the model, laying down the thinner and enamel on one part before moving on to the other. The satin varnish combined with the thinner will direct the panel liner as if by magic, and when everything dries, your shading and panel lining will be done. and done fast and well. Before the painting is complete, now we need a couple coats of matte varnish. This will protect the work we just did and reduce shine, making the models better for photography. Your batch of models is now done, but there's one more step to consider: the quality. Inspect your work. Did it turn out as you would like? Do you see options to fine-tune an element or change a color? If you see room for improvement, then go ahead and look for a technique or product to make the change. This effectively takes you back to step 1, where you can keep enhancing the quality of your work until you're happy with it. So there you have it, the Miniature Landscape Hobbies method for painting model vehicles and tanks. I work primarily in 15mm scale for historical miniature gaming, but I think the lessons here crosses all aspect of painting in miniature. Once you design a process and commit to continually refining that process, the results will be incredible. But why go to all this effort? Well, if you don't want to speed up your work, improve your quality and consistency, or save money on supplies, then I guess I can't help you. But then again, I've never met a miniature gamer before who doesn't want to do these things. So please try this method and tweak it as you see fit. My genuine hope is that you can use it to get the most out of your hobby. If you'd like to learn more about 15mm infantry, please watch this. If you would prefer to learn some other handy tips, then please consider watching this other video instead. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. But most importantly, remember to keep building life in miniature.